Okay, our next speaker is Shaun Wallace, an independent art historian. Shaun has an MA in art, politics and management from Birkbeck College, University of London. He's an experienced art administrator with in-depth knowledge of contemporary and African diasporan visual art. He has worked at a number of galleries, both in Nigeria and in the UK, where his roles include assistant coordinator at the October Gallery, one of London's leading galleries for the contemporary African and African diasporan art. Ladies and gentlemen, Shaun Wallace.
Hello. Okay, I think. Can you hear me? Yeah. I might have to lean over a bit. I plan to stand up, but I'll just have to for now. Okay, so my name's Shaun Wallace. I consider myself a creative academic. I coined the term because an academic was not quite how I put myself in a box, and the creativity was kind of how I saw myself, and that is the work I do, and that of a cultural manager. So my area of scholarship is African diasporan art, and for those of you who, I'm pretty certain most of you know the term, however, it's been increasing in the last 15 years because of certain social currents and a resurgence of diaspora identity. So that is the area, and it's inclusive because people from the African diaspora can be from East Africa, they can be from West Africa, they can be from wherever. And so that's my area of scholarship. Okay, so I'm going to go through my PowerPoint presentation for you. Right, so I've got to theoretically ground this, so I know it's a bit dry and theoretical, but that's basically scholarship, and it's important for you to know really why it's important. So this presentation forms analysis and interpretations gleaned while researching the subject matter for my proposed PhD, which is lying a bit dormant at the moment, but hopefully it will kind of resurge, so we'll see. But it outlines through visual representations the work of African diaspora artists, charting a journey from marginalization to multicultural coexistence. Right, so the hypothesis of my PhD was an inquiry of the role these visual artists have had in furthering critical and cultural dialogue, reclaiming a sense of human agency through use of the artistic medium, and imagining a sense of world citizenship that sees its apotheosis in this era of globalization. There is a big movement of Afrofuturism in the arts, in the African diasporan arts. It's very tied up with what that gentleman said, sorry, it's post-soul theory, and all of this has moved forward, and now a lot of artists are working in that genre of Afrofuturism. Right, so the historical strands of inquiry, this is going to be finished soon because I know it's kind of dry, but it's really to find out the psychological influences on the artist and their work, the extent and effect of sociological influences on the artist and their work, and the nature and influence of individual perceptions of institutional power on the black subject, and how this relates to self-perception and the concept of self. So when I analyse works, it's not simply for the textual quality. So in art language, that just means it's not just what you see. I basically use these tools, psychological, sociological, and the rest, to deconstruct the work. That's what I do. And that's what makes it kind of unique in the context of the African diaspora in Britain. Right, so, because I wanted to set this up, you'll see on this one I've actually put marginalisation to multicultural coexistence with a question mark, because I think different people have different perceptions. And to be fair and honest, when I started doing the research, it was kind of pretty standard, and I thought, yeah, this is what I want to do. But then going through it, as it always happens when you're exploring things, things changed, and I figured that things are more cyclical than linear. Right, so I've got to show you a little bit of... I've put this film on, and it didn't actually, it's the wrong program, so we had a technical hitch.
We've complained to the police about the police and nothing's been done. We've complained to magistrates about magistrates and nothing's been done. We've complained.
Right,
we've
so
complained to the police about.
Right, okay. I just wanted to give you a backdrop to the time of this period that I'm doing, which is from 1955 to 2015. So it's quite a broad context. And I want you to know it's not really chronological. I don't really, because as I said, these themes turned out to be more cyclical. So, the whole thing was changing as I went along. But I wanted to give you the backdrop to the times. So this is something that I found on the Mangrove 9. I don't know if anybody's familiar with the Mangrove 9, but this will put it in context basically at that time in history.
We've complained to the police about the police and nothing's been done. We've complained to magistrates about magistrates and nothing's been done. We've complained to judges about judges and nothing's been done. Now it's time to do something ourselves. That statement was made at the Mangrove demonstration and represents the essence of black people's experience in Britain. That since we've come here, we've suffered a long train of abuses by the police with the active knowledge and support of the British state. And those abuses have been able to be carried out under the pretext that, quote, black people are criminals, sponsors, and prostitutes. That is a myth that has been created about us. That is a statement that was made by one police officer who gave evidence in the Mangrove case. Now, the demonstration that black people made against the harassment of the Mangrove reserve, the subsequent resistance in the courts, is an active explosion of that myth.
Right, so that was the timeline that I, kind of started the analysis of the artist's work, and then you'll see why I, gave you that backdrop, because sometimes when you're doing this kind of thing, it's important to get that kind of feeling for the time. I'm sorry, but I won't be able to show this next video. It's a bit of a technical hitch, but I'll give you a bit of the background. Right, so this was done in 2015, and it's by Cecile Imek. She's a highly regarded filmmaker, documentary now, and she really deals with the black experience in Britain now, and it's really about the black experience in Britain, and really interesting stuff. It's like a vox pop situation where she just informs people, interviews people, and they give her their impressions of what they think about being black in Britain today. So that was kind of the contrast that I wanted to share with you, but fortunately technology didn't allow me to. So, but definitely her work is worth checking out. Right, now we're almost finished with all this concept stuff. Right, the composition of ideas and theories posited by in this work is by three notable African diaspora social scientists. Now, I'm pretty certain some of you know who Professor Stuart Hall is. May he rest in peace. And I have had the pleasure of meeting him. I did some work at the Institute of International Visual Arts, and I was taken aback. This man, basically, for a lot of people in my community, I'm of Jamaican heritage, really laid the groundwork for respect within the institutions for people from the African diaspora. You may not be familiar with Kobena Mercer, but he's now a professor at Yale University, very highly regarded again, and his work is about art theory, and he really kind of grounded the British experience of being the art theory in the British context. A lot of the work was taken from America, and even with music and so on, it has to be local and it has to be specific. And that's why I really champion these three, because it wasn't easy, and they had to really kind of get their theoretical groundwork in the institutions, which has allowed people like me to do the work that I do. Dr. Robert Beckford, now this is this person I was planning to do the PhD with, and he's a theologian. So I'm going to move on. This is the term that he came up with, and these terms are specific to my work because I need to go beyond just, the surface. And these are the things that he came up. It's his conceptual framework. So the theologian and broadcaster Dr. Robert Beckford has articulated a bespoke mode of critical inquiry that would be essential to a project that seeks to analyse the Black African phenomenon within a theological perspective. So it is theological, and it's didactic, it's interrelated, and they reside under the banner term, heteroglossia. Right, so that's all the theory done with. Biographical, so this is really where it starts, the imagery. And this is really, again, back in the time of the video that I showed, this is where it starts. I'd say 1955, 1965. So I'm going to go through some of these artists who broke through the visual arts canon. It's really, when you're in the arts and everything, you take it for granted. And, and history is so important. I know my work is very it's interdisciplinary. It's not just history, it's art theory, like I said, I've shown you. But, really, historically, it's also very interesting. Right, so I don't know if any of you know this man. No? Okay. Right, Uzo Egonu. He's from, oh, you do? You do? Okay, great. Okay, he is quite an exceptional character. I believe he went to St. Martin's, and a lot of the great artists and designers and so on have been to St. Martin's. Incidentally, they've moved right near me in King's Cross in London, which is great. This study of Piccadilly Circus, painted in 1966, combined all of the elements that marked the beginning of style of painting for which the artist has become famous. Piccadilly Circus symbolises both the spiritual and commercial aspect of London with pathos and humour. If you look carefully, you can probably make out the central figure of Eros in the middle. Obviously, it's influenced by Cubism and so on. Obviously, in a talk of this time, I don't want to go into it, but his work is really important in the terms of was one of the first to enter the canon, and we're talking at times where it was very difficult. Right, Ronald Moody. I went to Tate Britain the other day to see this man's work, and it was so powerful. I just was taken aback, and I would always say, if you can, go ahead and go to museums. That's what they're for. They're free. We're lucky to have it. And, a lot of people can take family members, and it's a nice, half term and stuff. And it's really important to know that these people were, this was cast in 1955. And you don't often see this particular, which is why I thought I'd show you this, because you won't see that necessarily. You'll see more of the naive work that he does in wood, which, curators have their, ability to do what they like. But, I thought it was really important to see some diversity in his work. Right, Frank Bolin. Does anybody know him? You do? You seem to be a person interested in art, so that's great. Okay, he, again, was another one who entered the visual arts canon. Very important in terms of, because he was the first Royal Academician. He went into the Royal Academy, which is just like, Michelangelo and all these people went there. So, it's no small thing. And the first black artist to enter the Royal Academy. I don't think you can see it in this painting. However, he's Guyanan, he comes from Guyana. He settled in Britain at a certain time. And there are references to that in his work. Different maps, Australia, I believe that's South America, and his island. All of this is called abstract expressionism. I particularly love this man's work. He is important because he was part of the the Caribbean artists movement, when people were finding that it was very difficult for them to enter the canon. They started to coalesce, and when they did, They pretty much, made us a big statement on British society in terms of their work. And interestingly, also with Aubrey Williams, so he started the Caribbean arts movement with, these are some names you may or may not be interested: Camus Braithwaite, Wilson Harris, Louis James, Evan Jones, John LaRosse, Ronald Moody, who you saw the picture of before, Orlando Patterson and Andrew Solke. So all men who started this movement because they felt that their art was being marginalized. He is interesting now because of Mayan culture. He was very influenced by that, which Mayan mysticism highlights prophecy and so on. And so his work falls within that kind of mystical thing. Bonham Pack is where some original, it's like AD 500 or something, where the Mayans had some friezes on the wall, and it's quite an interesting archaeological site. Right, so experimental. It's cyclical rather than linear, but still I think it's easy to break down. Right, so we're going to talk about the period very squarely with the Black Arts Movement and some of the artists that were very important in terms of breaking through. So this is another generation. This is the next generation who themselves had a different experience of being British than their parents, who had originally come from the Caribbean or Africa, and their experiences were different again, and they weren't so deferential, and they basically broke down a lot of the. They broke into the art system in a way that could be seen at the time as being very controversial, let's put it that way. So, Isaac Julian. He's important because in the work that I do, I always want to represent people. It's very important. Historically, women have been excluded from the art canon, and, other people, because of whatever reason, have been. And, Isaac Julian is such an important figure in terms of what he did at a particular time. This is 1989 when he did Looking for Langston. I think it's groundbreaking. I think it was brave. I think it was, the man is now, unless you've got practically millions, you can't afford to get his services. He has done well, and a lot of people still don't know who he is, yet his body of work speaks for itself. So like I said, very important to include female artists who a lot of people, if I asked you, and if I said to you possibly, oh, can you name me one or two female black artists who are working between this period? I've been doing lots of conferences, and it's rare that people can name me them. And it's such a shame because these artists really broke through, and they did so in a way that was very powerful. I mean, you can read the statement. And she is a professor at, I can't recall which university. Sorry? Right, exactly. So I had a particular love for her. I wanted to include regions as well. I didn't want it to be just London-centric. I mean, I wanted in this presentation to have people, regardless of where they live. Okay, Lubena Hamid. Very important in terms of black British art and African diasporan art. I use the terms interchangeably, but it's they have different ends. Right. This was the time. We're coming up to the end of the 90s, and during this period, of course, there was different francophone and anglophone Africans coming into Britain and settling. I mean, I'm not saying they didn't historically, because that's the whole purpose of being here. We know that certain things are, happening all the time. But this was a time that was interesting because of some of the extreme elements that were associated with, the Islam. So his work is interesting. This man is a barber, and he's a very skilled barber. So I'm pretty certain that even back in his early career, when he was unable to make a living like a lot of us artists, is for us artists, he was able to use his skills in a really kind of effective way, which I think is great. I wish I'd have thought of it, He is now considered to be, for that period, he's really considered to be a very important artist because he was kind of very clever. I'm really sorry. It's ironic that because he's a photographer, so, essentially it's very degraded, the photographs, you can't see them properly. But I mean, I'd like, these are just giving you clues as to where to go if you want more research. A very important artist. Right, so again, this is my argument. As I've mentioned before, post-soul theory was important, Afrofuturism, I'll get to Afro-pessimism in a minute. These are the two things weighing up. And in the art world. You know, arts are open-ended. People can do things that they can't do in the ordinary world. So it's about experimenting and exploration. It doesn't mean that it's right, and everybody's got their interpretation. So that must be remembered. Now, Barbara Walker. This is really powerful. Barbara Walker is considered one of the most important artists at the moment in terms of Black British artists. Her son Solomon, and this is why I thought it would be good to show her work. Her son Solomon had been stopped so many times. I believe she lives in Birmingham. She comes from Birmingham, and he'd been stopped and searched quite a lot. You know, he'd been innocent, and she is a draftswoman, and she created this body of work. And she created this body of work from the script that they give you when you stop, you know, with stop and search. And she used her draftsmanship skill, and it's very poignant. I think you'll see what I mean. Barbara Walker's work. Again, you know, amazing artist who deserves attention. Her work is online, you know, and it's very interesting. Okay, so this is state of the art. I went to see this last week, literally, no pun intended, well, pun intended. It's state of the art. It happened at Tate Britain. What we're talking about now in terms of Afrofuturism, you're talking about people who are experiencing or wanting to experience this kind of sonic experience. Let's just put it like that. It could be sonic, it could be, you know, something otherworldly. And it's very interesting because Tate Britain does have a relationship with slavery. Tate and Lyle have a long, you know, recorded history, and therefore this mission to the land of misplaced memories actually traces it, and they call it the sugar ship, and then they go there and, like I said, breaks down some of the kind of experiences through memory. So memory is really important because that's partly why we're having this debate, because obviously we don't have enough recorded information. So that's what they're addressing, and it's really important that it's done in this kind of scholarship. Now, I'll close, so I'll probably overrun a little bit. But this is really, in terms of the scholarship where I'm at the moment, I think that there is Afrofuturism and Afro-pessimism. And I think that it's important to have a bit of both. Like Maria Popova says. Thank you for listening.